Hello, it is February 2025, we're just about still in February, and I'm doing a review for this book. This is Blitzed by Norman Ohler. I hope I'm pronouncing that okay. It's German, and I might be pronouncing that really badly, so I apologise if I am. And it has been translated by Sean Whiteside. Okay, so this book is about it's about World War II, and it's about the German armed forces and Hitler himself using Class A drugs. And it's not a fiction. So, is it even true? Is the first question. And when I first heard about this book and looked it up, I, just sort of didn't pursue it because I thought it probably wasn't true, or just been blown up out of all proportions. And then I heard about it a couple more times, and I found out it was at my library as well. So I thought, I'll just read it and see for myself. And it certainly does appear to be true. So Ohler, who has written this book, he's used quite a lot of declassified documents, and also some things that were already available, but he's sort of looked over them again and perhaps pointed out things that people have just sort of skimmed over, particularly because these products weren't being taken as sort of Class A street drugs like they would be today. They were being taken as pharmacological products prescribed by, doctors and medical people, officially people. So he's sort of, reanalyzing things. And it's actually really, really interesting. It's very interesting in terms of the Second World War and the German forces and Hitler in particular. It's also interesting on a sort of wider scale, because he does talk about like the English using benzodines, and then you sort of think about so this also, the whole Second World War comes at a time of right on the back of cocaine and morphine being developed as pharmacological products, and then it makes you think about other things that have been used over the years as well, and how these things, when they're given out to the wider public, and obviously there are a lot of products in use today, a hell of a lot, and used by a lot of different people, to make you think about the effects that it's having on individuals and the wider society. So it's actually really, really interesting, because he's talking about some of these products were actually over-the-counter products as well. Right, So he goes into a little bit of a history of some of the pharmacological products, as I was just talking about. So talking about morphine, cocaine, heroin, and how, you could get these were legal products and things like that. So he's talking about in Germany during the 1920s, the legal sales and developments of cocaine and opium and products relating to them. And that's just really interesting in a subject on its own, actually. Then he's talking about its specific use in the armed forces during the Second World War. So this book, it's sort of telling two stories. It's telling one about the armed forces' use of, in particular, Pervitin, which is this crystal meth chemical product, and then sort of Hitler and his real sort of spiral into drug use from having a sort of very clean living reputation. So he sort of goes between the two more in the book. I'm just going to sort of split out and just talk about the armed forces and then Hitler, because although he, goes between the two beautifully in the book, I don't think I'm going to go between them so beautifully. So I'm going to split them up. He talks about the development of Pervitin. I'll just run through a little bit on this page. I don't think I'm going to do a direct quote. I'm just going to skim over a few important points. So he talks about how it has been noticed at the Olympic Games in Berlin in 1936, the influence of benzodrine for the USA. So then the Germans start looking into products that would be helpful for them to use. It's like completely mad. Okay, so they turned to the work of Japanese researchers who had synthesized an extremely stimulating molecule called M-methylamphetamine as early as 1887 and crystallized it in its pure form in 1919. Okay, so this is the drug that goes on. A short time later, on the 31st of October 1937, the Temmler factory patented the first German methylamphetamine, which was called Pervitin. Okay, and then it is literally sold as an over-the-counter product, with the benefits of, lifting your mood, giving you energy, stimulating you. It's kind of madness, really. One of the things I really loved in here, though, was this advert for these Pervitin-laced chocolates marketed at housewives to help them enjoy their housework more and get it done quicker. It's just like, it's kind of mad, but it's true. It's the world. So yeah, it's really, really interesting. So he's talking about the whole culture of the 1930s, and with these products being pushed, particularly with this sort of drive for more productivity. So he's saying that as well, that the effects of Pervitin are similar to like a massive adrenaline boost, but without sort of rises in blood pressure and things like that. So you've got energy, alertness, confidence, and the product works through getting the brain to release loads of dopamine and noradrenaline, and it also blocks the reabsorption of those dopamine and noradrenaline, which means that they continue circulating, so it lasts a long time. It's long lasting. But obviously, because that's completely unnatural to how the body should be working, it does damage cells, and there's a long recovery period afterwards, when you could be experiencing depression, loss of drive, cognitive disturbances. So that all makes sense. And you can also see how when this product is initially being marketed, I mean, he even talks about how, they're sort of sending out free samples to sellers and doctors and things like that to promote it. And obviously trying it, people are going to have a wonderful experience, think this is some kind of amazing wonder drug, and not perhaps noticing the negative effects of it so much, because they're so taken by the wonderful initial positive responses. It's really interesting. Right, so then he talks about the use on soldiers during the Polish invasion and the Blitzkrieg that went through sort of Belgium and France. And he really thinks that it had, a really powerful effect on those invasions, because forces could just keep working, keep going, and men were being expected to stay awake for sort of days at a time, which they just wouldn't have been able to do without this powerful stimulant keeping them going. So it's really interesting to think about what effect that did have on those invasions and how different it could have been without them. So then he talks about that sort of use going on throughout the war. Obviously, as the war goes on, and these products are used more and more, they will have less effect, and they will also have negative effects. And he actually talks about right near the end of the war how they're sort of getting quite desperate for different products that can work for people, especially in sort of the last year, and some of the almost suicidal missions that were going on, and some of the concoctions that were given to the, at that time, very younger and less experienced soldiers as well. It's quite disturbing, really. So, and that would have been not just with Pervitin, but mixed with sort of cocaine and morphine based things as well, just to sort of keep people going. Particularly some of the stories of the submarine users was it's quite disturbing. Okay, so then he also talks about Hitler. So he talks about initially Hitler's sort of image in the 30s. So his image is very much about being ultra sort of conservative and clean living. Well, is he that conservative? But anyway, very clean living, and he's meant to not drink and be a vegetarian and things like this, and very into sort of strength and physical strength, mental strength, all these sorts of things. And then he gets a private doctor, Dr. Morell, who's really quite a fascinating figure in himself. And this doctor is a bit of a quack, really, and into all sorts of different products. So he starts giving him regular injections, from about 1936-37. And this is initially mainly vitamin supplements and things like that, but intravenous ones. And this is to sort of help with Hitler some of his digestive problems. And it does seem to really help to begin with. So Hitler's very impressed by this and begins using him more and more. Morell becomes his personal doctor, and Hitler's now having a lot of injections of things like glucose, vitamins, steroids, iodine, and different parts of animal organs. Which, I mean, although it all just sounds quite gross anyway, he's, this sort of, it's definitely not the kind of highly dependent drugs that he'll later move on to. So he's definitely feels like he's in control of this at this time. He really starts being given Eucadol in 1943, and Eucadol is a morphine-based product with a stimulant in it, so it's not, it doesn't make people drowsy. And it seems that he was given this because, especially as the war is dragging on, and actually Hitler's health seems to really decline through the war, and obviously there's going to be major psychological issues going on in him at that time. But it is worth wondering how much the effect of these, some of them quite bizarre products that his personal doctor is giving him, and even just the pure volume of them, how much that could potentially have been affecting his health as well. So he eventually, his doctor gives him Eucadol, which gives Hitler a massive boost. It gets rid of all his sort of pains that he's getting at the time, and makes him feel euphoric. So he likes that, and really by this point he's losing sort of grip on reality anyway. So it's really, it was really interesting. And then after the 1944 attack on his life, Hitler, there was an attempt on his life by somebody, within the armed forces. That after that, his morphine-based drug use, it really just explodes. So he does have some injuries, so he's using a lot more morphine-based products. He also has another doctor who comes along at that time, who is an ear, nose and throat doctor, to help him because he's had sort of, like his eardrums burst and things from the explosion, which is that's the attack on his life. They tried to, blow up where Hitler was. Anyway, so this ear, nose and throat doctor comes along and is giving him cocaine to deal with that, which is obviously which he loves, and that's just going to increase his demand as well for the morphine-based products. Okay, so Morell, this doctor, is a really strange character, and his notes about Hitler are quite sort of sporadic and incomplete anyway. But it certainly seems that he was having much, much more of these drugs, to a ridiculous point. And then you see a real physical decline in him as well, in his abilities. It's really, really interesting to think about how much of Hitler's decline, how much it was chicken and egg, whether it was the drugs causing his massive physical decline, or the massive physical decline that required so much more pain relief to be able to get through. And obviously, the whole Third Reich sort of world takeover invasion, which was, really a prolonged suicide mission. The massive psychological effect that's going to have on an individual. And also Ohler talks about as well, because Hitler became so sort of detached from reality through his increasing drug use, that you have to wonder if he could have been talked down at different points, or, you know, talked less out of this continuous ongoing suicide mission. Yeah, so it's really, really interesting to think about that. Okay, a couple of small bits to read out. So this is talking about Eucadol and that first use. So the fact is, Eucadol was first used in 1943, but was injected so often between September and December 1944 that one must consider the possibility of a physical dependency. Okay, the happy fix came at a cost of unpleasant side effects, insomnia, tremors, and constipation, and talks about how Hitler begins to suffer all of these things, particularly the massive digestive issues and the physical tremors, which become, you know, more and more increasingly difficult for him to hide and to even function properly. Yeah. And then he talks about how, as they begin to retreat closer and closer to Berlin, by the time they actually get to Berlin, Morel has really run out of many of his products. So Hitler then is basically going through withdrawal. I mean, like last you know, weeks of the war, literally everything destroyed, and he's going through withdrawal. I mean, it's, yeah, pretty horrible experience. So the sight of Hitler now only caused revulsion, or at best pity. Everyone circled around him, trying in vain to make him feel good. Still, his condition kept deteriorating. In the past, all his loyal followers had been nervous at the first cough or sniffle. Now his tooth enamel was decaying, his gums were drying up, and his ruinous teeth were falling out. His brain, irreversibly damaged by neurotoxin, was no longer receiving stimulation. All the receptors that the transmitters could have filled were switched off. Okay, so he talks about how he just, you know, he's into this loop of paranoia and things like that. It's really, really quite a, you know, horrible end. Yeah, and I think, yeah, you have to talk about how much Hitler was actually very slowly killed by this doctor, but also how much he, I mean, I know he's like a psychopath, but what efforts could have been made by people to try and, you know, end this situation before it was quite so terrible. Yeah. So it was all really interesting. I really enjoyed the book. It was very well written, very easy to read. Ohler was a very harsh critic of Hitler, though. Not that I'm saying he should be like supporting him or anything, but yeah, he really, you know, tears into him throughout the book. But it was absolutely fascinating. I really, really enjoyed it, and I think I'd like to learn more about, you know, as well, things that the American and British forces were using as well, different products. And actually, I think this whole is just interesting as well, learning about this whole period, and the use of, like I said, the use of these different products on normal everyday people, and to understand the effects that has on individuals and the cultural psyche. And maybe to think about that in terms of today as well. And yeah, and it makes you think about how we will look back at some of the products being used today, to the extent that they are used as well. Okay, so that was really, really good. I definitely recommend that book. And it was very easy to read, and it was very, very interesting. It was really good. Okay, so that's that book done. And the one that I'm reading now is this one. This is Caliban and the Witch, and this is by Silvia Federici. It's like I hope these are pronounced okay. Obviously, I apologise if I'm just hashing up their names. Okay, and I'll hopefully give a review for that next month. Okay, thank you.